What is it like to give up all your worldly possessions and become a renunciant? It's so interesting because in this world, in this culture, we have this concept of success as the ability to have lots and lots of things. It's sort of the more things I have, the better off I am. I mean, think for a moment, even we use the word well off, right? What does well off mean? What's well off a synonym for? Wealthy, right? Rich. As though somehow the money you had in the bank were absolutely synonymous with your well-being. Nobody would say, well, she's really poor but really well off. I mean, you'd think, well, what does that mean? That's like saying she's really black but really white. It doesn't make any sense. They're opposites in our language. Well off means you're rich. As though somehow the numbers that come in my bank statement are actually the measure of my wellness. Now, we all know that's not true. But it's important to mention because even in the question, it implies, I mean, nobody ever would ask a question and say, God, what's it like to leave your desk job and go to Hawaii for a week? There's something inherent in all of us that understands, oh, well, that would be great. You don't have to ask a question. If someone says, yeah, I'm going to leave my desk job, I'm taking a vacation, I'm off to the beach, nobody's going to say, why? What's that like? Because in our mind, we've labeled the desk job drudgery, a burden. Yes, exactly. And we've labeled a vacation on the beach heaven, wonderful. So it's good and bad. Obviously, when you've got the choice, you're going to leave the bad for the good. Yeah, I'm going to leave my desk job and go to Hawaii. But this same judgment comes in when we ask about leaving possessions, becoming the renunciate. Why would you do that? What's that like? And it carries in it the same value judgments. Why would you leave something good? It's like saying, well, God, I'm gonna leave this Hawaiian beach and go get a desk job. Then people would say, why? What's that like? So we have this sense that having a lot of possessions, having success is good. Is what you should want. This is the mark of wellness. I'm well off. But then you give all that up? Why would you do that? What does that mean? And what's so important here, and that I just want to emphasize over and over and over again, is that which we have has no connection to how well off we are beyond a certain point. Now, if you don't have money to eat, if you are starving to death, yes, having some money to have food to eat will make an absolute difference in how well you feel. If you are homeless and you get money to have a home, that will make a big difference. If you want to send your children to school so that they're not homeless, but you don't have the money and somehow you're able now to send your children to school, that will make a big difference. But beyond the most basic necessities, beyond having food to eat, beyond having a roof over our head, beyond having access to basic medical care, basic education, there's no more distinction. But we've placed these value judgments. So, as Puja Swamiji always says, we focus on filling our shelves instead of filling ourself, because we're taught the fuller my shelf is, the happier I'll be. So we keep looking to fill those shelves. What I experienced on a personal level was, having had very full shelves, having had all of those things, I was given. I have to be honest and admit I didn't go out looking for it. If I knew it existed, I would have searched day and night. But I didn't know it existed. I didn't know this life existed. I didn't know there was an alternative. And that's true, sadly, in most of the West. In India, in traditional India at least, spirituality is such an inherent aspect of the culture that people know it. For most of us in the West, even if we have religion, there's very little overlap between the religion that I practice in my synagogue or my church and an experience of wholeness or fullness in my life, at least from my experience. So when I came here, just traveling, had taken a semester off of a PhD program to come to travel. When I was here, I experienced such an experience of fullness, of wholeness, of joy, of bliss, that it was worth more than everything else I had combined. The example that I usually give to explain what that might be like is, imagine that you spend your life collecting rocks or seashells on the beach. And you do it because it's what everyone else is doing. They're pretty, they're shiny. You look for the nicest ones, you hold them. Now you've got hands full of seashells. And you feel happy. Then, at one point on the beach, there's someone out of the blue with a bucket full of diamonds. And they're just pouring diamonds out of the bucket. Now, what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to throw those seashells. Anybody here going to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I don't have room for your diamonds. My hands are full of seashells? We're instinctively going to drop those diamonds because intuitively we understand we're going to drop the seashells because intuitively we understand no matter how beautiful I thought they were, they're of a much lesser value than the diamonds. I am being offered something of a higher value. There isn't room for both in my hands. Therefore, I'm going to. There's actually a great, great story of a sage who one day found along the path where he was walking, a renunciant, found diamonds. Put them in the bag. The renunciants usually walk with just like one little thing, one little, whether it's a jar or a jug or a pot or a little bag, whatever it is, but he put them in. And a short time later, he met a man on the road, and the man asked him for something. So he opens up his little bag to see if he has what the guy's asking for. And as he opens it, the man sees the diamonds in the bag. And he says to this renunciant, oh, actually, what I'd really love is one of those. And of course, he doesn't say diamonds. He doesn't say very expensive thing. He acts really stupid. He says, I would just like one of those shiny rocks. And the renunciant says, sure, Take them. Hands them to him. So he thinks, oh, this is so great. I've gotten away with everything. And he walks off with the renunciance diamonds. A few days later, he comes back. He comes back to the renunciant. And he says, I need to ask you something. And the renunciant says, yes. And he says, do you know what that was that you gave me? And the renunciant says, well, sure, they were diamonds. And he says, well, then I need to ask you something else. And he says, yes. And he says, if I give you back the diamonds, would you give me whatever it is that you've experienced, that you know, that enabled you to give me the diamonds in the first place? What is it in you that enabled you to part with those diamonds? I want that, because that's of infinitely more value than these rocks. That which you had that enabled you to give them up so easily. That's what I want. Because it took me a few days, but I realized that's of much more value. And for me, what happened was, it was intuitive. It was not intellectual. It was not something that I can say I realized in some great feat of wisdom. It was intuitive. That which I was given here, what I experienced here, was of infinitely more value to me than that which I had behind. And it was very clear to me that I couldn't hold both in my hands at the same time. All of the things that I'd been attached to, from material possessions to relationships to goals, all of those were simply means to an end. And this is true for all of us. And this is a little harsh, but bear with me and just take this home and let it percolate inside you. All of that which we do, regardless of how altruistic or compassionate we may think it is, we do it for one reason and one reason only, which is we believe that in doing that, we will experience happiness. On one level, on the most superficial level, I eat chocolate because I will be happy if I eat it. Go deeper, I serve others because in serving others, I feel good about myself and then I'm happy. There's nothing wrong with being happy. I'm not saying this as a negative thing. Being happy is our nature. We should be happy. But it's important to recognize that actually the reason we do everything we do, the reason we're in the relationships we're in, is to be happy. Now, some of you could say, well, I'm not happy in my relationship. In fact, I'm miserable in my relationship, but it's just my duty that says do it. Well, what that means is that for you, the knowledge that you're doing your duty brings you more happiness than leaving this relationship would. You're not in the relationship as a martyr. You're in the relationship because living a life of doing your duty makes you happy. The end goal is always, I should be happy. And again, nothing wrong with that goal. It's a great goal. We should be happy. But we just need to recognize that for what it is, because so many of us live our lives convincing ourselves that, well, I would be happy if I did this, but I'm not doing that because blah, 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 blah. And it's important to realize, no. If I'm not doing that, it's because feeling that I'm the type of person who can withstand this or survive that makes me happier. And that's a higher happiness. I mean, anybody who has ever compared the happiness you get from a night in a pub to the happiness that you get from an afternoon with, children on a cancer ward, or an afternoon reading to blind people, or planting trees, or doing some other form of service, well, the happiness lasts a lot longer when we're serving. It lasts a lot longer when we're connected to others. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about what makes me happy. And for me, what I experienced here was so much more bliss and joy than all of the visions I had had of joy. When I get my degree, then I get this job, then I build my house with my white picket fence, and then that paled in comparison to what I had just been handed. The joy that I thought I was getting in my relationships or in my possessions or in the social life paled in comparison to what I was given. So I didn't leave anything. Renunciation is not the sense of I'm so great because I gave up that which was really good for something that's not quite so good just because it's holy. Renunciation is through grace, through no credit of my own, through grace, I was able to experience the truth, which is in this life, the happiness is greater than with all of my possessions, than in the life I was living, which is why we leave it. Because even as sannyasis, it's still about inner happiness. It's still about inner bliss. But it's an inner bliss that comes not from a pair of brand new shoes or a new story on my house, but on an inner connection. And so for me, that was what I was given. So it's a renouncing of that which didn't bring real happiness in favor of that which did. Which is why I made the choice. It's not a martyrdom at all.